This is our go-kart restoration project. Didn't have any tie rods on it at all, so we don't have anything as a template to go by. But we need to make a bar, a rod that goes from there to the steering shaft, and then another that goes from the steering shaft to the other spindle bracket. First thing was to line up the wheels. So I rigged a 2x4. It goes from the rear wheel to the front wheel. And I did the same on the other side. And lashed them together with a ratchet strap. And strapped it all down good to line up the front wheel with the rear wheel on both sides. Well, here's our parts tray for the tie rod job. We have all our tie rod ends and the bolts to hold them together. Just use regular nuts for quick assembly, and then once we're finally done, have all our final adjustments in, we'll use the lock nuts to lock it down. The rod that we'll be threading and using for our tie rods. We have a gold Sharpie marker so you can see it on the metal, and tape measure. Well, we've got our steering shaft squared off. Use the bungee cord to the steering wheel to kind of lock it down so it can't move or anything. So we've got our wheels locked down with the 2x4s and the strap going across. We got the wheels squared off. Now we can measure from the center to where the tie rod ends go. Got the tape measure laid out with the tie rods in place. And it seems to be about 11 inches is what we'll need to cut our pieces of rod, and then we'll thread them up. And the other side is 11 inches as well. We've got our rod measured out to 11 inches, and we've marked it with our cold Sharpie. Now we'll cut it. With our handy dandy cutoff wheel. Now we have an 11-inch piece of rod. We'll cut another one for the other one, for the other side, and then we will thread both ends. Before we thread our rod, we need to smooth off some of these rough edges here. Now to start threading our rod, we will clamp it in the vise. Grab the cutting fluid. We're ready to tap our rod for our tie rod. First we have to choose a tap. Two different choices, a 3/8 by 16 and a 3/8 by 24. To be able to know which one we need, we'll grab one of the tie rods here. And a couple of bolts. Standard coarse thread, that would be the 16, and also the finer thread, and that would be the 24. and that's what threaded in our tie rod. So we will go 3/8 by 24. Got our die loaded up in our die holder. Tells you which side to start from. So we'll put a little bit of cutting fluid on our shaft to aid in cutting and provide a little bit of lubricant. Set it on there. From this says which side to start by. Start it like as such. Just push down and try to hold it as level as possible until you can get it to bite in. And it's always best to go about 1/4 of a turn once you get it to bite, and back up and cut in again. And you can kind of feel it cutting 1/4 turn and back up, and you can feel it cleaning the threads out on the back way too. Threading around there a bit more. You can hear that. Add a little bit more cutting fluid. 1/4 to a 1/2 turn. Go back a couple times, clear the threads out. That's what these openings for are, is the pieces of steel that you're cutting out. Go up into there, and then they'll end up following down the shaft here. Show you where we're at right now. Got the stuff there. Got the bits of metal that's falling down. And we have our threads. There's our tie rod. Let's get this sample bolt out of here. And voila. Isn't that nice? Get that back out from there. I'm going to cut these down a little further, probably another 1/2 inch or so. That way it'll fit all the way up in here, or 3/4 of the way if we got to adjust it a little bit one way or the other. Alright, we got our rod all threaded. So that's debris out of the way here. Make sure got no metal in our threads here. We have a fine threaded nut. That'll be our jam nut. And then we've got our tie rod. That we have to adjust out once we get it where we want it. Bring that up to it, lock it in place. Well, that was a good solid tie rod. And we got to do that to the other end of this rod, both ends of the other tie rod, and then we'll get them on the cart. Now we've got both our tie rods together. Put the outer tie rods on both ends. The jam nuts on the insides, and we'll install them on the cart. Back here at the cart, we've got our tie rod end here, threaded into our inner tie rod, so to the steering shaft. In. We'll do the same thing with the other side. Both the tie rods assembled to the inner steering shaft, but they end up being a little bit too long. And they're both adjusted all the way in. We're going to have to take about 1/4 inch off of each tie rod. Well, since our tie rod was a little too long, we need to trim it down about 1/4 inch. But also, if we trim it 1/4 inch here, we have less threads. So we need to extend the threads down 1/4 inch first. Get our same die back. As you can see, we have the tie rod threaded more now. So we can cut off about 1/4 inch of it because it was too long. First thing we're going to do is run our jam nut back on here. So that way after we cut off some, if the threads got messed up a little bit, we just back the jam nut off, and that'll help clear out the threads. So I'll get our handy dandy cutter and we'll get this cut off. Yep, didn't want to just get off by hand, but like I said, we're bring this jam nut back down off it. Helps clear them threads back out. We can thread our tie rod in down here. See if it'll go all the way down now. We've removed our 1/4 inch of material. It's about as far as it'll go. We can bring that back up to adjust it. And that's about what we took off. Back here at the cart, installing the shortened tie rod end. So we'll thread it all the way in here. Like I said, we're putting the jam nuts toward the middle, that way they're not seen as much. Let's see, our end here is lining up better. Adjust it out a couple of turns. Put our nut on it. Alright, we've got the other tie rod shortened up now. There we are. Watch over here how close we're getting the lining up. That's all the way in. Let's see how it ends up with the bolt. Looking pretty good. We got tie rod to the steering shaft. The other tie rod. They're all good and tight. We've installed tie rods on this go-kart. We'll remove our outer alignment boards. See how it works out. Another thing I wanted to show on here was to double check our Ackerman angle. So we attached our string to the center of the rear axle. Brought it up here to the bolt on the spindle. And I would say the engineers at Manco is on their stuff, because I would say we're within a few degrees. I'm not going to mess with it, but just wanted to point that out. Alrighty, we've got our tie rods all assembled. We've got our guide boards removed. And let's take a look and see how it works. It would help if we removed our bungee cord that held our steering wheel in place. Yeah, bet you it works now. I think we did it. That's how you replace the tie rods on a go-kart. In our next video, we're going to get the electric motor mounted up.